Hello everyone and welcome. This is the June 2025 WPE Workshop for the portfolio reading set topic, The Spirit of Play. This workshop was created by Rose Mooney, our program coordinator, and myself, Betsy Gomez, the Associate Director of the Writing Proficiency Program. It's just going to be a short presentation. We'll talk about what to expect with the WPE, what you need to submit, and then we'll have some tips for you. So you can hopefully pass and not have to worry about this again. Please make sure to bookmark our website, which is www.umb.edu/WPE. Our website houses some helpful content, such as the WPE portfolio requirements in better detail, our grading criteria, our schedule, our testing schedule, and copies of our resources like the grid notes and these PowerPoint slides and video. You may also book a quick question or hold release appointment or tutoring appointment via the links on our website. So we've designed this short video to help you get familiarized with the WPE grading standards and with the portfolio requirements. We're going to go over the submission process, kind of what that looks like, and the submission schedule. We're also going to talk about how the grading criteria works, what basically are the 3 criteria that the graders are going to be using when they assess your essay. And then we'll take some time to offer advice on how to write hopefully a successful challenge essay for the WPE. So this will include a discussion on what kind of essay to write, how to incorporate and give credit to the sources, and how to make sure you're answering the essay prompt. And then we will model how you can use an organizational tool like the grid notes to create an index of important quotes, just to make sure that your challenge essay effectively engages with your sources. We're also going to plug our tutoring and draft review services and kind of give a timeline of when you should expect to be able to sign up for those. The grading criteria for EREP and the WPE are the same, and it's helpful to just familiarize yourself with what that criteria is. These are the standards basically that the graders are using to grade, to assess, your submission. And the criteria were created by the faculty at UMass Boston, and they directly relate to the aims of the Gen Ed program and really the aims of the entire school. These are basically the things that the university wants you to be able to do in order to graduate, and earn your diploma from this institution. According to the general education program, writing proficiency involves critical thinking, critical reading, and elements of writing. So these capabilities are demonstrated within an essay by the following criteria, which are writing with a clear purpose, effectively utilizing source material, and organization. So these are basically the 3 things the graders are looking at. Keep in mind that you're not expected to write like the perfect essay. This isn't going to be necessarily the best essay you'll ever write, because hopefully that essay is still in your future. You're still college students and you're still learning and growing, and the graders really expect your essay to demonstrate intermediate proficiency in writing. So what that means is that the WPE is not a spelling, it's not a grammar exam. We're not grading you on how correctly you use MLA, APA, format, any of that. What you're really being graded on is whether your essay clearly answers the essay prompt, on whether you engage with and utilize your sources in a way that supports your answer to the question, and on whether your essay is organized in a clear and understandable manner. So it's important that you write an essay that shows your thinking and your point of view. So we'll continue to remind you about this throughout the workshop, just because it's that important. So a few more things on the WPE grading. The challenge essays are graded on a scale of 1 to 9. That's kind of like the rubric that the graders are using. And developing essays earn score between 1 and 3. Proficient essays earn scores between 4 and 6. and exemplary essays earn scores between 7 and 9. So what that means is that in order to pass the WPE, your challenge essay must earn a score of 4 or higher from 2 different faculty graders. The course papers, those will provide more of a supporting role in the WPE. The graders might consult them to assist with difficult decisions, like the 3 or 4 score split. For example, if your challenge essay is strong in the areas of focus and organization, but maybe not as strong in source use, the graders may take a look at your course papers to see if they demonstrate proficient use of sources. But the main thing that will be graded, the most important artifact that you will include in your submission, is the challenge essay. The first grading criteria for WPE, again, is the criteria of purpose. And writing with a clear purpose involves having a sustained focus on a position, argument, or inquiry. Your position, argument, or inquiry, those are determined by what you think, usually in response to a prompt or an assignment. A proficient essay clearly states its focus and maintains that focus throughout the entire essay, so it's not hard to kind of figure out what the focus is. A proficient essay presents a methodical, connected discussion. And how can you make sure your essay is focused? I would say, include a clear answer to the prompt, ideally at the beginning of the essay. Just make sure that you tell the reader what your answer to the prompt is. You'll use the rest of the essay, the body paragraphs, to really make a convincing argument for your answer or to explain your answer. Really use your answer to the prompt as a roadmap to organize the rest of the essay. For the second grading criteria of effective use of source material, that will involve you carefully selecting, integrating, and explaining the source material. It'll involve applying that material in service of your essay's purpose. So your essay's purpose, remember, that should be kind of like your answer to the prompt, right? So the way that you're using these sources is to support that answer. An effective use of sources, that usually means that you've moved beyond just summarizing the ideas in the text and towards some meaningful engagement with the ideas in the texts. So you should ideally engage in a conversation with the sources. You can connect the sources' ideas to your own purpose and argument, or you can argue against, the sources. You don't have to agree with them if you're arguing something different, but you do have to engage with them and move beyond summary. And yeah, you should also try to contextualize the ideas from sources. You can briefly review the source's argument, right? Just a short review or summary before moving on to, okay, now I've told you what it's about in like a sentence or two, and now I'm using an actual quote, an actual passage that I'm going to analyze to prove my point, basically. So the source material that you need to use for the June WPE, those are the 3 readings in the reading set. So you should have received the link to the reading set when you registered. We also email it pretty much every time we email you with a reminder about signing up for tutoring, going to the reading labs, our weekly updates. We always include the link to the reading set there. And that reading set has 3 different articles all about the spirit of play. And the reading set is about 18 pages, I think, total. So those 18 pages, those are the sources that you are expected to use when you're writing your essay. Please do not use outside sources as much as you think you really want to. Don't make this more complicated, right? Part of the assignment really is, how can you show us what you think, how you think, and how you organize these thoughts, right? Given the assignment that we've provided you with. So, for the sources, I would really just say, make sure that when you do use anything from a source, any idea that doesn't come from you personally, Obviously, make sure to give credit to the authors, but also really explain what the source is saying in your words, right? What do you think the source is saying? We can both read the same sentence in, the reading set and have a wildly different interpretation of it. So this is your essay, so this is your time to engage with these authors and explain what you think their words mean and use those words in support of your answer to the prompt. Organization would be the last of the 3 grading criteria, and organization is basically kind of like the flow of your essay, how you organize your ideas, basically. A strong organization will, guide the audience from paragraph to paragraph with transitions that, make connections between paragraphs. The organization really indicates that you're aware that your reader needs to be guided through the flow of your ideas, right? Your ideas might make perfect sense to you because you're living inside of them, right? But when you present an argument in an essay, you do have to do a little work of taking your reader, by the metaphorical hand and guiding them through what you're trying to say, right? You really want them to reach the same conclusion you have, or at least to think, okay, this conclusion that the student has reached, I get why they reached that conclusion, and I think it's a valid point, right? So how can you make sure that your essay is organized? Always think back on your thesis statement. When I say thesis statement in this case, I'm really referring to your answer to the essay prompt. Just make sure that each paragraph is related to proving your answer. And try to make sure that each body paragraph, so body paragraphs are the ones that aren't the introduction or the conclusion, they're kind of the guys in the middle. So try to make sure that those paragraphs include a topic sentence, right? A sentence that tells us, okay, this is what this paragraph is going to be touching on. That it contains evidence, right? Evidence would be examples from the reading, right? And that it includes analysis of those examples, right? And that then you move with a transition, towards the next idea. Okay, so we're going to take a short break on, the grading criteria to really go through the portfolio requirements. So there are a few requirements that students should ideally meet when they submit their WPE. So the biggest requirement, the most important requirement is the new paper. We also call that the challenge essay. So the challenge essay, again, is the essay that we've assigned you to write. Once you registered, you should have received the link to the reading set and the prompt. We send you that pretty much every time we send a general email to everyone who's registered. And your challenge essay should be 1,500 words or longer. So that's 1,500 words or longer. It should utilize, right, the 3 sources in the reading set in some way or form, and only those sources. And for the 1,500 words or longer, I always get questions like, does this include the works cited page? Did this include the title page, the cover page, if you're more used to writing an APA style? So the word count, we're really only counting the actual essay, right? So we're not counting works cited. In fact, a works cited page is not required because you're only using the 3 sources in the 18 pages of the reading set that we give you, right? So when you refer to a source, when you give credit to a source, just use the page number in the reading set, right? So 1 through 18. Make sure you tell us the author's name, and just make sure that you use examples, or that you argue with, for or against, different parts of each of the 3 articles, right? So your challenge essay, again, 1,500 words, and that's just counting the meat of the essay, right? Not works cited page is not required. A title page or cover page is not required. If you feel comfortable, if that's just kind of how you write any essay, and how you've written essays for years, go ahead and do it. But that's not going to count toward the 1,500 words. So besides the challenge essay, you'll also need 2 essays from any course you've taken at UMB, 750 words or longer, and then 1 essay, again, for any UMB course, 1,250 words or longer. You'll need to submit a confirmation form. You'll get access to that form basically closer to the deadline. The confirmation form is basically just a Microsoft form where you fill out your name, student ID, info, like that. And then you certify, basically, you certify that the essays, the challenge essay and the course papers that you're submitting, that those were written by you and you only, and that you're giving us permission to grade them, basically. So if you are a first semester transfer student, meaning that you started classes this spring, right, in January, then, submission of the course papers is a little bit different. So instead of 3 course papers, first semester transfer students can submit only 2. Just try to submit one that's a little bit longer, the 1,250 words or longer, and the 750 words or longer, right? Everyone, no matter what, is supposed to write the challenge essay. That's kind of non-negotiable. If you're signed up for the June WPE, you must submit a challenge essay. So first, if you're wondering what types of course papers are appropriate for submission in the portfolio, here's just some guidelines. The essays ideally should be from different courses taken at UMass Boston. 2 essays from the intermediate seminar are allowed if you did ERAP in the past or just took the intermediate seminar in the past. That's a very common course that students will choose an essay or 2 from. The essays must be from courses taken at UMass Boston. You can't submit anything from one of your previous schools. At least 1 essay ideally should be from a 200 level course or higher. So the intermediate seminar is a 200 level course, so that would, hit that category as well. Ideally, since you are being graded on the source use, right, your essays should use sources. But with advanced approval, you can send us an email, send us some papers that, might be based more on observation, like a lab report or a case study, and we can give you permission to include that. And again, the essays ideally should be analytical, use evidence from sources, and present an argument, basically because these are the things that you're being graded on for the WPE. Since you're being primarily graded on the challenge essay, if you have some concerns about the essays that you're going to include in your portfolio, you can always send them to us via email. You can talk to us. If you don't have any or enough course papers, please talk to us. We'll do everything we can to make sure that you can submit. We want you to submit. We want your challenge essay to be graded. So just if you have any questions or concerns about your course papers, just make sure to send us an email or set up a meeting with us sooner rather than later. So, so your concerns can be addressed, basically. So just as a reminder, does everyone have to submit the challenge essay? The answer is yes. If you're registered for the WPE, you must submit the 1,500 word challenge essay. That's the main thing that's being graded, so definitely you have to submit it. And the challenge essay is based on the reading set and the prompt that you received when you registered for the WPE. And like I've mentioned a few times in this presentation, we also send the link pretty much every time that we send a general message to everyone signed up. So if we send you a reminder for a reading lab, about tutoring, if we send you a weekly update, usually at the top of any of those messages, we include a link to the reading set. So just make sure that, in one of those messages, you click on the link, I would suggest that you save the reading set. You have it on your computer. If you want to print it out, if that's kind of helpful for you, do that. But definitely don't lose track of it. We do send it to you a bunch, but you do need to start working with it at some point. So I suggest that you download it or print it out. All right, so for the portfolio submission schedule, we have quite a good number of dates here, but basically the portfolio is due on June 4th. You will submit that via Blackboard. So Blackboard, not Canvas. We're using Blackboard. You're basically the last group to use Blackboard for the WPE. This is our last time using Blackboard. You should all still have access to Blackboard. And by May 29th, we'll enroll you in a Blackboard course that will be called CAS 015, and we'll be emailing you instructions to submit. The instructions, once you get to the Blackboard, once you click on the Blackboard course, it'll be pretty intuitive, especially if you've used Blackboard or Canvas before. But we have the link for Blackboard there. You should still have access to sign in with your UMB login, but you won't see anything now before May 29th because we're waiting for registration to close, and then we'll sign everyone up for the class. So once you're registered for the class, you'll have from May 29th basically through June 4th to upload your submission to Blackboard. You'll have until 11:59 p.m. to do so. And then the next week, our graders will get to grading. They will spend a couple of days assessing the portfolios, and results will be sent by June 13th via email after 5 o'clock. June 16th through the 23rd, we'll do retake counseling. Retake counseling basically is what we offer to students who may not have passed the June WPE, right? So if you pass, you're done with the writing proficiency, your degree audit is updated to show that you've completed the requirement and you're all set. But if you receive a retake, that means that the graders did not give you a proficient score. And it's really important that between June 16th through the 23rd, that you schedule a meeting with one of our faculty graders. So a retake counseling meeting does take place on Zoom because you're meeting faculty who aren't necessarily teaching over the summer, but they are counseling students through this. And you'll talk to the faculty member, get some feedback, written feedback from the graders, and you'll actually get to use that feedback to revise your challenge essay. So students that meet with a retake counselor get to revise their paper. They get a week after their retake counseling appointment to basically implement the changes that are, or the suggestions really, that the graders have noted would probably help your essay be stronger, right? So revisions are due a week after your counseling appointment. What happens after you submit your revision is a new batch of graders will look at your submission. They'll look at the original submission, and then they'll look at your revision, and then they'll determine if the revision merits a proficient score. So some students do end up passing on revision, which is great opportunity for you to get feedback on what you've submitted, and use that feedback basically to improve your writing. So for students that don't submit a revision, or submit a revision but the revision does not pass, those students will have to do the WPE again, and the next WPE that we're offering will be for October, and registration for that will open sometime in September. Usually happens a little bit after ad drop, and then the October WPE would be due sometime in mid-October. If you are looking to graduate in December, in fall 2025, December 2025, you have to pass the WPE by October. Otherwise, you know, there won't be kind of a WPE graded in time for graduation. So I would say if you don't pass initially, I would really encourage you to meet with a retake counselor, just so you can try to do the revision option. And if that doesn't work out, there's still the October WPE. All right, so we're now moving to the advice portion of this short workshop. These are just kind of a few tips for you to keep in mind as you start working on your challenge essay. Basically, the most important component of your challenge essay, it's going to be your own thinking. If you don't express your ideas and provide logical support for your own ideas, it's not very likely that you'll pass. So remember what the grading standards are, right? They're the focus or purpose, the source use, and the organization. And those are all tied to your own thinking. So you can't pass this without yourself, without your own thinking. So for a few, the first few pieces of advice, we're including a few do's and don'ts. Our first don't, please don't write a report, and do write an essay. So what that means, right, don't just summarize what the 3 articles are about and then that's it. It's not a book report. We're actually asking you to answer this prompt, to argue for your answer, and that would make that more of an essay than a report. Do use the reading set sources. Don't over summarize. And do engage with the sources. So, you know, have a conversation with them. Just think of your essay as basically kind of like the 4th source in the reading set, right? You're arguing against some of these authors, maybe, depending on what you think. You might be arguing for, right, with using their words to support your own, but do engage with them. And then finally, whether you quote, like direct quote, whether you summarize, and do that sparingly, or whether you paraphrase, do give credit when you're using someone else's ideas or words. Always give credit. It's just very important that you give credit when you're using someone else's ideas. And we'll break down this advice in a bit more detail in the next couple of slides. We already went over the differences between a report and an essay in the last slide, but the main difference really is that a report may have a lot of summary and is meant to inform the audience about something, and an essay has a small amount of summary, right? In an essay, the writer's goal is to persuade the audience that their argument is correct, or at least important or worth considering. So in this case, you are the writer here. You're the author, and your goal is to convince your readers that your answer is correct, again, or at least worth thinking about, right? So in an essay, you will take some sort of position. You'll present an argument that's supported by information, right? Where are you getting the information from? The reading set. And your argument should also be supported by logic. So that would be your own thinking. And as mentioned earlier, your thinking is essential. The graders want to know what you think. Another piece of advice for you, do answer the question directly and unmistakably first. Don't wait until the last moment to answer the question. Usually, a lot of times when that happens, the rest of the essay doesn't match, you know, the bottom of the essay. So your answer to the prompt, you know, that's your position, that's your thesis statement, you know, to use more of a English composition course terminology. It's really important because it's the heart of your essay. It's basically what your essay is going to be about, what you're promising basically that you're going to prove this or that, right? So one thing you can do to make sure that you answer the prompt is just to recycle phrases from the question itself to create your position. So for the question for the June WPE, what is the relevance of play to human adults. And that also says here, as part of your essay, please offer a complex definition or explanation of play and focus and discuss how and why play is an aspect of the lifespan for human children, adults, and animals. So possible answer here that kind of recycles phrases from the question. The green is, you know, the recycled parts. So play can be defined as, right? That directly answers that second part. And play of this nature is relevant to human adults because, right? And then you would have maybe a few reasons to prove what you're trying to say. You don't have to use this template. You can create your own template. You don't have to use a template at all if you know you feel like you can just start writing on the prompt. But it's, if you're having trouble making sure that your argument is clear, then I would try to, at least initially in your first draft, try to use a template like this. You know, here's my answer to my prompt. And this is probably a little bit easier to use than in this essay, I will answer the prompt, right? So in this essay, I will answer the prompt doesn't help as much because you haven't actually answered the prompt, right? So try to think of your answer. As you write, your answer might change, and then you can just kind of edit what you've written earlier. But really, you know, it's really important to have an answer because that'll really tell us what the purpose or the focus of your essay is. So just a bit of continuation on answering the prompt. Again, the prompt is, what is the relevance of play to human adults? As part of your essay, please offer a complex definition or explanation of play and discuss how and why play is an aspect of the lifespan for human children, adults, and animals. So, you know, if you're still kind of wondering how to answer the question, I would say first, obviously, you'll have to read the reading set, right? You can't get out of that, unfortunately, although we can help you with it. But breaking down the parts of the question, I think, can be really helpful. So what is the relevance of play to human adults? Here you can think of a few bullet points like, what does it mean for something like play to be relevant, right? What does relevant mean? How do adults play, right? There's some examples in the reading. You might have your own examples to think about. And how is play beneficial to adults across the lifespan? So again, there might be some examples in the reading set that you can kind of pinpoint, examples from your life that you can connect to the examples from the reading. And for the second part, you know, as part of your essay, offer the definition of explanation and discuss how and why play is an aspect of the lifespan. So how do you define play, right? And how is play an aspect of the lifespan for an animal, for a child, and for an adult? And why do animals play, right? There's a lot of theories in some of these readings about why animals play, as well as why children and then adults play. The graders, so the graders for the WPE, they will be familiar with the reading set. Just like you have to read the reading set, the graders also have to do so. So that's yet another reason why you don't need to summarize in so much detail. Instead, use the reading set material to expand on your argument. So we have an example here of a paragraph that has some summary, right? But that mostly, you know, uses direct engagement with the sources instead of just summary. And again, usually when you're directly engaging, you'll see more direct quotes. You'll see more basically analysis or kind of a conclusion being made, you know, by the author. So here the author is saying that one reason play is relevant to human adults, right, there's that word relevant, right? Part of the question. So one reason play is relevant to human adults is because play can improve intelligence. So they're saying that's one of the ways it can be relevant. As with children, adults can increase their own intelligence by playing more. For example, Coners and Francis suggest that play should become a paradigm to improve pedagogical practice in higher education institutions such as UMass Boston. In other words, here's where they're using their own words, using their own thinking. In other words, incorporating play is significant or essential to improving teaching in college. Coners and Francis argue that play plays a dramatic role in our ability to think and solve problems, and this effect continues into adulthood, although play in adults is different from the play of children. The evidence indicates that play can have a significant role in the development of thinking abilities in people of all ages. For example, Lentz points out that physical play yields a more agile and well-balanced adult, while playing with others, such as by pursuing a hobby in a group, strengthens social bonds. More importantly, play has been found to be a very effective way to enhance learning in students of all ages. Brown, that's yet another author from the reading set, summarizing the findings of John Byers, states that play assists in development of the brain's frontal cortex, which is the important brain region responsible for much of what we call cognition. However, for adults, play that has the greatest impact probably should be intentional as well as pleasurable. Therefore, here's a conclusion. It seems likely that people who are motivated to continue to learn and grow throughout their lives should choose to engage in activities that are challenging but pleasurable and take advantage of our intrinsic drive to create/solve problems and overcome obstacles, right? So here, I think they might have used evidence from all three of the readings, and there is summary, obviously, like a little bit of contextualizing, like, okay, here's kind of what they're talking about, but they're definitely engaging with the sources, kind of finding connections between them. And then at the end where they're saying, it seems likely that people who want to continue to learn and grow, kind of like in intelligence, right, because that's what this paragraph is about, should choose to engage in activities that are challenging but pleasurable and take advantage of that drive to create or solve problems. And that also tells me, potentially as a reader, that maybe the next paragraph will expound on that a little bit more, right? Maybe the next paragraph that this author is writing is going to be about, that drive to create and solve problems, right? So yeah, this is just an example of a paragraph that utilizes the reading set basically to support their answer to the question. And I do encourage you, you don't have to write paragraphs exactly like this. I'm not saying this is not prescriptive, right? This is just an example. But it also shows how you don't have to write about the readings in the order that they were presented, right? A lot of essays might make the mistake of just summarizing, here's what first author said, here's what the second author said, here's what the third author said, right? And that sometimes can be tricky because if you're spending too much summarizing your thesis, right, your answer to the prompt is taking a backseat, right? So again, if you use kind of a template for your thesis statement, just keep that always kind of in your mind, write it on another piece of paper and just have it there, like, is this paragraph related to my answer to the prompt, right? And try to use that to go from there. Now we're going back to the advice of do give credit. Always give credit to the other authors. It's important that the graders can differentiate between your ideas and the ones from the authors in the reading set. So that means you need to be careful and make sure to cite when you use someone else's ideas. And we just have examples here of summary, right? When you use summary, which you're going to use sparingly, right? You briefly spell out the main points of something. When you paraphrase, you reward someone else's statement, right? You reward someone else's statement, maybe in about the same number of words, but it's still kind of a statement you're taking from them. And then the direct quotation, that's probably the easiest one to use. It's taken directly from the text. And we just have a few examples here of what summary, direct quotes, and paraphrases can look at. These aren't the only examples. You'll see with the direct quotations as well, there's like direct partial quotations, right? So when you always see the quotation, that means it's taken word for word from the reading, even if they only took, you know, that part of the sentence, right? But I would say that it's very important to try to do more direct quotes than summary and paraphrase, just because summary, again, slippery slope. You might just end up reporting instead of writing an essay. And paraphrases, I think, are just very difficult, and sometimes writers forget to give credit, you know, with page numbers and author names. So here's just examples of what you can do. But whatever you do, when the idea isn't yours, when it didn't come from your own brain, when you got it from that reading, make sure to tell us who that idea is from and what page in the reading set you got it from. Okay, so now you know a little bit more about what you need to submit and what you need to do in terms of the challenge essay. A few things for your planning stages if you're a planner. I know not everyone is, but you know, I would suggest that you try to get your copy of the grid notes handout on our website. You can fill it out electronically if you download the Word file. You can just also print it in the PDF. And using the grid notes isn't required. I know not everyone kind of works that way, but it can be a helpful way to make an index for yourself and ensure that your essay is a conversation between your ideas and those of the authors in the reading set. To use the grid notes to create an index and promote engagement with your sources, you'll see here that it can just help you create an index of ideas in the reading set. You can see that the student here has filled out the page numbers where they think those ideas are discussed. And it can just be useful to keep that index because you might have an easier time finding quotes, right? If you put, you know, for how is play an aspect of childhood, okay, you know, in Lentz page 6, you're going to go there, you're going to get a quote from Lentz. I know some students sometimes actually put the quote in the little box. That's also fine. But it's just kind of a good way to keep track of things that you find important and that you might find useful later. And you can also use the grid notes to try to synthesize the sources, to basically mean instead of using the sources separately, you can use them together to support your own argument, right? If you see that 2 of the 3 readings or even 3 of the readings have a definition of play, maybe, you know, you can play them against each other, to use a bad pun, I'm sorry. Or if you see that they talk about a certain aspect differently, right? That's a good, it's good to keep track of those differences so you can maybe talk about it in your own essay. Finally, as you're planning on, you know, you're working on your essay, finishing your essay, don't overlook the resources that are available to you. We do offer remote reading labs. Basically, those work, the main thing that happens is you're working in a group to read and discuss the reading set. You don't need to read it beforehand, and you don't need to register. You just kind of show up. Usually, our tutor, Connor, will be handling one of the readings. He'll maybe read out loud, pause, maybe have a few things to point out about the paragraph, have time for questions, right? And just move on that way. They're usually an hour long, so you might not read the whole article, but you get a good start on making sure that that's read and understood. So we've had those through May 9th. It says here there is a possibility of more dates to be added, and I think that will happen. How do you sign up? Basically, all registered students will be sent reminders via email. So every time you see an email about a reading lab, just click on it, try to look at the schedule, see if it works for you, make a note to attend. For tutoring, we do have remote or in-person tutoring. Tutoring is really great if you can't come to the reading labs because they don't work with your schedule. It's a one-on-one session with our tutor. Our tutor right now is Connor, and he is very knowledgeable and very helpful. So now through May 23rd, there's a bunch of tutoring appointments available, but closer to the deadline, they'll get snatched up. So I would really encourage you to try to sign up for your tutoring appointments now. And tutoring isn't just for students that are struggling. You might think, I don't struggle with writing, this is whatever, and that's great. But sometimes in the tutoring session, you can just read with the tutor. Hey, I keep trying to read this and I'm getting distracted. Here's 45 minutes where you can read with someone and ask questions, right? Or, I always wait until the last minute to write my essay. Maybe I want to write a draft now, right? A tutoring appointment, again, a great place to maybe do some guided writing, right? Some brainstorming. And then finally, June 2nd and 3rd, so the days before the portfolio is due, we will have draft reviews. Those will be by appointment only, and feedback is sent via email. So I would say these are asynchronous, right? You're not meeting someone one-on-one, but you are basically reserving a time slot on their calendar. So for example, if you sign up for a 1 p.m. time slot on June 2nd, you have to make sure that you email us your essay before that time on June 2nd. And then at 1 o'clock, the tutor will read your essay and write some feedback. The feedback will be kind of taking into account whether you're meeting the grading criteria or not, and give kind of suggestions for how to do that. For that, the scheduling link will be sent via email in our weekly message on May 30th. So we haven't opened the draft review, schedule yet. That it opens up later this month. But yeah, if you have a draft now, well before June, that's another thing you can do in a one-on-one tutoring session. And if it's a one-on-one tutoring session, you would actually talk to the tutor, at that time, right? The draft reviews are great just to get written feedback a few days before it's due. You use that feedback to do your final revisions. But if you want more of that one-on-one, I definitely encourage you to take up the tutoring options. This concludes the June 2025 WPE workshop. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us via email. Our email is writing.proficiency@umb.edu. You can also schedule an appointment for tutoring or for a quick question through our website, right? Just go there to find those links, and good luck with the writing process.